Alrighty, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as we are at noon, and people will trickle in as we go, but Ross and Elizabeth are going to do introductions of our speakers, but I just wanted to quickly go through some housekeeping items. So this webinar is the last of the Advancing Resiliency series. A huge thank you to Ross of Wetlands Watch and Elizabeth of the Virginia Coastal Policy Center. You've been incredible to work with, and it's been a pleasure putting these together with you. The CM credit is listed here. I will also put it in the chat box. This webinar will be recorded and posted to our chapter's YouTube page. I will also share all of those links. There will also be a attendee follow-up email with the speaker's contact information, along with resources such as the presentation, slide decks, and other helpful information. We do encourage questions. Please submit all of your questions through the Q&A box versus the chat box, just to help our moderators and our panelists keep track of everything as they come in. You may also use the raise hand feature to request to be unmuted to ask your question live during the Q&A portion at the end. But otherwise, please feel free to direct message me in the chat box if you have any logistical questions. But at this point, I will pass it over to Ross and Elizabeth to introduce our speakers. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Jillian. And it's our pleasure to be here today for this final in the series, as she said. And I think I can speak for Ross in saying that it's been a delight to work with Jillian and with all the other APA folks. So thank you for agreeing to host this series on climate change training. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce our great speakers today. And then afterwards, there will be some time for Q&A that Ross will help us with and moderate. So I'm going to kick it off with introducing Matthew Wells, the director of the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, or DCR. Matt Wells became DCR director on March 21st, 2022, and he has a background that brings together policy, politics, and advocacy with over 2 decades of experience in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. Immediately before joining DCR, he was senior regional manager for state government relations for WestRock, a global leader in sustainable fiber-based packaging solutions, where he oversaw the company's legislative interests in environmental stewardship and sustainability, forestry, economic development, and other issues across multiple states. He also brings substantial experience in state government, having held senior analyst and special advisory positions with Virginia's Departments of Motor Vehicles and Alcoholic Beverage Control. A strong proponent of water quality improvements and land conservation, he has been a leader in Virginia Forever, which is a nonprofit coalition that brings the business and environmental communities together to advocate for shared natural resources funding priorities. There, he led a diverse group of environmental advocates and business leaders working to encourage greater spending on environmental programs by the Virginia General Assembly. He holds a degree in foreign affairs from the University of Virginia and a certificate in sustainability from Virginia Commonwealth University. Then we have Carolyn Heaps-Picaro, who is from the city of Hampton. She is their resiliency officer, a role that she has held since August of 2021. In this position, she coordinates the work of an interdisciplinary, multi-departmental team that builds coastal resilience across the community. Her current work includes supporting the design and implementation of Hampton's cutting-edge environmental impact bond financed pilot projects for resiliency, which is what she's going to share information about today with us, as well as overseeing the creation of a water plan for Hampton's downtown and surrounding neighborhoods. Prior to joining Hampton, Carolyn supported various climate resilience and adaptation initiatives, including implementation of the Resilience Adaptation Feasibility Tool, or the RAFT, which is a partnership between UVA, Old Dominion University, and William Mary Law School's Virginia Coastal Policy Center. And she also was supporting USAID-funded international development programs. She holds a master's in urban and environmental planning from the University of Virginia. Then we have joining us 2 people from the Corps of Engineers, and we're very excited about that. Bob Peterson with the Huntington District of the Corps. He has served as the Interagency and International Services and Work for Others Program Manager in the Huntington District, as well as the Project Manager for the Buchanan County Section 202 project since rejoining the district in April of 2019. He retired from the Army in 2014 as a colonel, where he served as an engineer officer in numerous command and staff positions throughout his 30-year military career, including previous U.S. Army Corps of Engineers assignments as a project engineer with the Savannah District, district commander at the Huntington District, and deputy division commander at the Great Lakes and Ohio River Division. He will discuss generally the Corps' funding programs with us today. And then Ken Woodard with the Corps' Huntington District. He serves as chief of the plan formulation section for the Huntington District. His staff leads studies in flood risk management, ecosystem restoration, dam safety, inland navigation, and other Corps civil works missions. He previously served as a project manager on projects ranging from $150,000 to over $150 million. Prior to that, Ken was a lead engineer for environmental remediation, primarily of former military sites, and he received his undergraduate degree from Virginia Tech. He wants me to say go Hokies. I don't know if I can do that. He will discuss a current Corps project in Buchanan County. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt.
Great, thanks, Elizabeth. Just make sure I can share my screen correctly here. Checking to make sure, Elizabeth, can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Great. Well, very much appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all this morning. My goal today is to give you an overview of some of the key activities that DCR is undertaking as it relates to resilience. I know the focus here is on funding, but we've got quite a bit of activity both on that and the planning side, so I'm going to hit on a little bit of that as well. Just a quick update or an overview of DCR for those of you who aren't super familiar with the agency. We do a lot of things. We're the state's lead natural resource conservation agency. We manage the state's park and preserve network, so 41 state parks, 66 natural area preserves that total about 171,000 acres. We manage a number of the state's land conservation programs, soil and water conservation programs through soil and water conservation districts. So the ag cost share program comes under us in part. We regulate about 2,600 dams. So we manage the dam safety program for the state. And then finally, relevant to this conversation, we are the lead on the National Flood Insurance Program for the state and point on a number of our resilience programs. I've also been tasked with delegated authority from the state's Chief Resilience Officer, Acting Secretary of National Historic Resources, Travis Voyle. So we both wear kind of dual hats on that also. So before I kind of get into the activity update, I do want to frame how we approach a resilient Virginia from a DCR and from an administration standpoint. We have a number of principles that we try to use to guide our activity. Go to that. So first of all, first principle is that we're committed to addressing these challenges that are related to flooding and resiliency. There are challenges, they're major challenges. The second is that we have to do this with programs that work for all impacted parts of Virginia, because it is a statewide issue. And in fact, if you actually look at the flood maps, the western portion of the state actually has more flooding events over the past 20 years than the coastal region. So different parts of the state are impacted differently, but it is a statewide issue. The third principle, that the programs that we implement to address these challenges have to work together as part of comprehensive, cohesive plans. And then the fourth principle, that the programs and plans that we develop have to be done so and implemented with transparency and input from the public. So these, I'll refer back to these a little bit as we kind of walk through what we've got going on. So as I mentioned, we've got quite a bit of planning activity underway. And the third principle there was that the efforts that we undertake to address resilience challenges need to be done as part of comprehensive, cohesive plans. I will say that we're not necessarily there yet, but we have made some important steps forward. This started under the previous administration with the Coastal Resilience Master Planning Framework that laid out a number of goals and principles for how the Commonwealth is going to approach its resilience planning. That was then followed by phase one of the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. Calling it a plan is probably a little bit of a misnomer at this point. It's really more of a threat assessment for the coastal region of the state for part of the threat. So the phase one takes into account seawater flooding, so sea level rise, subsidence, all those things that lead to greater seawater inundation. And it kind of built the framework for the planning activities to come. So the fact that it is phase 1 implies that there will be a phase 2, and that's what we're working on now with the due date of December 24. Phase 2 is going to build on phase 1 by incorporating all major flood hazards for the coastal region, and that includes precipitation-driven flooding. It will include a list of projects, resilience projects, and update projects that were previously on the list. And it's going to include a comprehensive risk assessment of critical human and natural resources, or excuse me, infrastructure. So the goal here is with phase 2 to really turn this more into a plan that is actionable, that has projects that we can draw on as we look forward and as we consider the funding programs I'm going to talk about a little bit later. Having an actual plan and list that we can pick from to have a little bit more of a cohesive effort than we have now. I mentioned that this is a statewide problem, and there is also a statewide plan that's under development with a due date of December of 2026. This is actually an existing document that is supposed to be updated every 5 years. The last time it was updated was 2005. I think it's on our website if anybody wants to check it out, but it's obviously a little bit dated. The statewide plan is designed to be a place-specific plan for mitigating severe and repetitive flooding that includes at a minimum an inventory of flood-prone areas, an inventory of flood protection studies, a record of flood damages, strategies to prevent or mitigate flood damage, collection and distribution of information related to flooding and floodplain management. So it is intended to integrate the Coastal Resilience Master Plan using a watershed-based approach. And so our intent with the statewide plan is to start in the western part of the state, because that is where the data are not super strong for us. So we can kind of start at both ends and meet in the middle is the goal. Another one of the principles that I mentioned is that our activities need to be developed with input from the public and transparency. And we've got a number of activities that we're undertaking to support that. Some of these are in fulfillment of legislative mandates. Some of them are administrative. So first of all, we put the Coastal Resilience Master Planning Framework and phase 1 of the master plan out for public comment. They were not put out for public comment when they were first adopted. We thought that was an oversight, so we put those out at the end of last year and got some really good feedback. We've also put out for public comment that just closed a community outreach and engagement plan for how we intend to engage the public as we develop the Coastal Resilience Master Plan phase 2 and the statewide plans. And our goal here is to really kind of take a whole community approach to get beyond the folks that typically show up for meetings like this, TAC meetings, to really understand what the community needs are. We've also established through legislation a Coastal Resilience Technical Advisory Committee that's ongoing, and it meets quarterly. That's designed to help support the Coastal Resilience Master Plan. And then finally, we put together a resilience coordination working group that's meeting monthly through November. And that's really designed to get at how we can do a better job as a state of coordinating the various resilience efforts that we have. DCR owns a lot of them, but we don't own all of them. How we can do a better job of coordinating our funding and how we can better draw down federal dollars, and generally how we can set up a better system of governance than what we might have now. So turning to funding, the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, or the CFPF, and I know a number of you all are probably familiar with this, has been the agency's primary means of providing funding support for resilience to localities. So the CFPF is designed to provide grants and loans to localities to support a number of resilience-related activities. This includes planning, studies, capacity building, and projects. To date, we have only used the program for grants. We are exploring the possibility of loans, but given the speed with which the program was set up, grants are frankly just easier to do. And so that's where we started. We did just wrap round 3, which we initially advertised for $40 million. We got 64 applications for nearly $93 million. So we wound up having an initial round of funding that we put out, and then a supplemental round of awards where we released an additional $30 million. So in the initial round, we awarded a little over $13.5 million to 27 projects. We then put about 32 remaining proposals into a supplemental review that allowed us to go back out to applicants to try to make corrections, to basically enhance their applications, because we understand it is a new program. In the past, people were selectively offered an opportunity to revise their applications. We didn't think that was the right approach. We wanted kind of this broad-based approach. And when we wound up, I think that resulted in good applications. The goal here was to fund good projects now rather than kicking them into a future round. So we announced 22 additional awards at the end of the year for $51.7 million. And all of the applications, all the scoring are posted on DCR's website. Again, that was something that was important for us as a transparency measure. So just looking quickly at the types of projects that we funded in the supplemental round, one thing that I do want to highlight here is that 63% of the projects we funded through the supplemental round were in low income geographic areas. That's well in excess of the 25% that's required by statute. All told across round 3, about 2/3 of the projects we funded were in low income areas. And here you can just see this is a list of projects from the supplemental round. You can see that there are some pretty significant projects in here. Norfolk's floodwall project, acquisition of Mayo Island for the city of Richmond. There are a number of things for Fairfax in here. I think we're doing a pretty good job of distributing these across the Commonwealth. There were some projects funded in Southwest Virginia in the initial wave of round 3, but we do understand that we need to do a better job of spreading this around the state, and that's something that we're going to be looking to do going forward. So across rounds 1 through 3, just shy of $100 million has been awarded to grantees. Again, about 2/3, the majority of that has gone to low income geographic areas. Grantees have 3 years to draw down funds, so we're just now starting to see drawdowns from the awards that we made in round 1. So what's next? The budget is obviously still very much an open question at this point, but the governor's proposed budget did contain historic proposed investments for flooding and resilience, more than $200 million. That includes $1 million for resilience coordination across the Commonwealth that would support, in part, the resilience coordination working group. That includes 3 new dam safety engineer positions, which I mentioned DCR has responsibility for dam safety and enforcement. Those are much needed. We've got currently 5 engineers regulating 2,600 dams across the Commonwealth. That's not a great ratio. This will help out with that a little bit. And then the big pot of money was a proposed $200 million for the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund. $100 million of that was contingent on the state meeting revenue estimates. This is in addition to the $25 million that the program was initially capitalized with, and I'll speak a little bit more about that in a second. The Senate budget preserved the entire $200 million. The House budget reduced it to $100 million, but still, hopefully, if we get a budget, we'll have some significant dollars flowing into that program. So we are in the process of putting together a revised grant manual for CFPF round 4. We haven't landed on an amount yet. In total, there's about $78 million in unallocated funds in the program, with several additional auction rounds to go before we withdraw from Reggie. So we're comfortable that the program still has several years of lifespan on it, even with the existing funding stream. Our goal is to put the draft manual out for public comment in the first half of the year. And our goal is also to do that in conjunction with establishing the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund. So this was legislatively created in 2022 to make loans and grants to local governments for resilience projects in cooperation with the Virginia Resources Authority. As I mentioned, we're currently developing the guides. Round 1 will probably be based on the $25 million that the program was initially capitalized with, just because of where we are in the budget cycle. One thing that we are exploring is how we might be able to use this fund to leverage a new FEMA storm grant, which is designed to capitalize revolving loan programs like this. The guidance was just put out. The timeline for this grant round is a little tight, but we are hopeful that we're going to be able to get into the mix and draw down some funds there as well. One thing just quickly that I do want to highlight, because when I talk about the revolving fund program to legislators, one of the questions I got, well, what does it matter, 100 million versus 200 million? And for us, the purpose of funding this revolving fund with this amount of money was to make it a true revolving fund, right? $25 million, I hate to say it, is not a lot of money when you're trying to set up a revolving fund. And so when we look at it, when we look at how much fund we want to put into it, it's not just so much about what do we want to have in the program now, it's what do we want to have in 5, 10, 20 years. And this is an example of two different funding scenarios. It's an example only, but really if you take the money out and you kind of continuously reinvest it at 2.5%, $100 million by year 10 will get you about $20 million in funds that you can put back out there. $200 million gets you almost 36 million. So it is a significant difference in the sustainability of the fund and our ability to put money out to localities, depending on how this thing gets capitalized at the outset. One of our main goals as we look to establish the revolving fund and to revise the grant manual for the flood fund is to have these programs work together. And the intent with putting the programs out together is to allow applicants an opportunity to select the program that's right for them. Both of these programs have a lot of flexibility, and we've been able to fund a number of things through the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. But really, if you look at kind of their statutory authorization, the CFPF is geared towards larger community scale projects. The revolving fund is geared more towards individual property and building what I call property scale projects. And so they are kind of different tracks, even though they do similar things and have a considerable amount of overlap that we'll probably continue to leverage. But the goal here again is to have these programs kind of exist in slightly different lanes going forward. So still to come, the revised manuals, again, for the flood fund, some of the things that we're looking at, we're taking some of the learnings from the last 3 rounds. What's the appropriate combination of grants and loans? What sort of loan terms and rates are going to be attractive for our partners at the local government level? What types of projects do we want to fund? What amounts are going to be available? The revolving fund has a building hazard mitigation set aside, and so we're trying to determine how much we're going to put into that. We want to look at the criteria that we're using for community scale for the CFPF. It is difficult, frankly, to craft one definition that works for all communities. What is community scale in an urban area could look tremendously different than what is a community scale in a more rural area. But again, we want these programs to be able to work for everyone. And so we're going to put those out again first half of the year. Those will be out for public comment. So I would encourage folks that have an interest in that to be on the lookout for it. Please give us your feedback. If you have thoughts now, you can send that in too. We're always open to thoughts and suggestions. And then lastly, one additional commitment that we've made for transparency and for public input is that we're going to establish an advisory committee to help review the grant and loan applications going forward. So we've got a lot going on, but appreciate the opportunity to fill you in on a little bit of it. And we're pretty excited. We think we've got a great opportunity here to move the ball forward on resilience.
Well, thank you.
Sorry, Elizabeth.
No, go ahead, Ross. That's great.
Excellent. Yeah, I just want to say thanks so much, Matt. That was a very helpful, really informative presentation. I just want to check to see if folks have any questions. We have one comment in the chat about thoughts on staying in Reggie. If there are any questions, any sort of feedback, certainly now's a good time to answer. We can also, if things come up, we can talk at the end. We've got probably 15 or 20 minutes at the end of this presentation, at the culmination of everyone's presentations to answer any outstanding questions. But and we've got an action-packed, 2 more presentations coming up. So if there are no questions, we can move on. Going once. Going twice. Okay, excellent. Well, then I suppose we'll move on to Ken and Bob from the Army Corps. Thanks again, you all, for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I'll just let you take it away.
All righty, give me just a second to share my screen here. And of course, the computer is going to be a little quirky now, so that's okay. We'll find a way to make it work. All right, you're all able to see my slides okay?
So right now it looks like you're in another tab. Looks like it's sharing the
Okay.
Ken, do you have duplicate, or do you have two screens?
No, I don't right now. Normally I do, but here we go. I found it. Now it's cooperating more, so better now.
There you go.
Okay, super. Sorry. So again, yeah, Bob Peterson's going to talk after me. I'm Ken Woodward here, as we said earlier there, and I couldn't get her to say go Hokies, so I can say go Hokies myself. And I saw some of the chat there. You know, I've been born and raised here and still live in the other Virginia, but you know, I'm still a Hokie. Anyway, just don't expect anybody to memorize this map here, but there are 5 different Corps of Engineers districts within Virginia. That's because we're based on watersheds. So you can see Huntington District, where Bob and I sat here in Huntington, West Virginia, which is about where West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky meet. We just have a small piece down there in Southwest Virginia, small but important. If anybody needs anything from the Corps, you know, please feel free to contact me, and I can steer you toward the right person in the district, in the right district there. So don't worry that you can't tell exactly where your dot would land or exactly where your potential project or study might be. We can get you pointed toward the right person there. So just wanted to show that, just because, as I said, it's based on watersheds, and we really just have the Huntington District has a New River watershed there primarily, and the Lavalza Fork Big Sandy watershed there. So I'm going to talk some about some of our studies that could be used to help with resiliency here. Kind of got what I call small studies, medium studies, and big studies, if I were to put them in the buckets there. So floodplain management services, these are 100% federally funded, so everybody loves these. We're doing some of these in Southwest Virginia now. One right now, usually less than 150K. And you can see there, you know, it can be used for information, technical planning assistance, guidance identifying magnitude and extent of flood hazards, planning appropriate use of the floodplains. Now, these small studies, which are really these first 3 bullets here, do not lead to core implementation on here, or at least especially those first 2. The second one, planning assistance to states, we can do anything, any of the same things we can do under the FPMS program, but we can do more. So we could do, maybe not focus as much on resilience there, but if there's issues with, say, water, like trying to find a new water source or doing something with groundwater or riverfront development, things like that, we can do under PAS, in addition to doing the same things we can do under FPMS. There's some recent language from the Water Resources Development Act of 2022 that may waive that 50% cost share for economically disadvantaged communities there for the planning assistance to states, or PAS. We're still waiting for final guidance from our headquarters on that. The Silver Jackets is really, that's kind of an umbrella for the state. There's a number of agencies involved in that. The longer name for the individual projects that spin off of that's interagency non-structural FPMS. So this, instead of money changing hands, maybe the Corps does this part. If we're working with say a town, a municipality, a city, a county, they may do this part of the project, maybe a state agency and or a federal agency does this part. We pull all those efforts together and those resources together for one cohesive project. That one is on an annual cycle. So if you have something there you may be interested in, please get in touch with me soon, because those proposals are due by the end of March there for the Corps to do something. Now we can put in proposals out of cycle as well, but the big push is here to get it done about the next 32 days or so. Talk a little bit about what I call our medium studies there. So they're under CAP, or Continuing Authorities Program. There are a number of different authorities, but I'll talk about 205 here specifically, since that's what we call small flood risk management projects. So the Corps, all the districts in the Corps put in for under various authorities and things, and then they determine how they're going to split out the money each year at headquarters and such. And you can see usually the first 100, well, always, if we're selected for a study, the first 100,000 that study is fully federally funded. Anything above that gets cost shared 50-50. Now, I'll admit it's really, really hard to get a study done for under $100,000. So a lot of times the locals have to come up with some form of cost share. Can be work in kind for that cost share, but has to be work done after the agreement signed. They can't take, and the same thing's true on PAS, can't take old work that's done and then get credited for that. So design and implementations cost shared 65-35. One I did not mention here, the federal cap for 205 is $10 million. So you're looking at possibly a project of up to roughly $15 million for the implementation. And again, they can share working, they can, some of that 35% can be working kind, it can be real estate rights. We call it LERDs, lands, easements, rights of way, relocations, disposal areas that they have to provide there, but that can be part of that 35%. So we have to compete once the study phase, then again for the design and implementation phase. Now the big ones, the feasibility studies, we call these also 3x3 studies or 3x3x3 studies. Congress says these, if Congress names these studies and they have to complete in 3 years for $3 million, there can be exceptions to that. We have to go through special process for that. And those are called shared 50-50 if one of those is done. So if Congress would give us the authorization for the study, then we also have to have the appropriations there, whether they give us the full $1.5 million of that at once for the federal, or if they choose to fund that over multiple years. We've seen it done both ways. So, and those can lead to core implementation. So those can be some of the big projects, some really big projects there. That can be, 100 million, hundreds of millions, $1 billion plus projects, multi-billion-dollar projects, like you might hear the Ike Dike down in Texas, or I know our Norfolk district has done a lot of work for Miami, things like that. So that's just some of our studies we can use to help out areas of Virginia with resiliency the Corps can use. Now I will hand it over to Bob to talk about Buchanan County.
Yeah, so thanks, Ken, and thanks everybody for the invitation to speak a little bit about the Buchanan County Flood Risk Management Project that the Corps of Engineers is doing in conjunction with the non-federal sponsor. That's a term that we use for the county who enters into a project cooperation agreement with us to do this work. So I'm going to be discussing Buchanan County project because we understood that there was some interest in that. Also, the Dickenson County Flood Risk Management Project is going on at the same time as this. It's an adjoining county, and a lot of the things that I'm going to be discussing will apply to that as well. But specifically, I'll just be discussing the Buchanan County project. So you kind of see a busy slide here, and I apologize. I have 2 slides here, and we like to cram as much stuff as we can in the one slide. Usually these are used to brief congressional members or stakeholders, but I'd like you to just focus on a couple things here. At the top left, this is a part of a news article that was published back in 1977, and that's what really brought this project to fruition. There was a historical flood in April of 1977, and that's what Congress used to direct the Army and the Corps of Engineers through the Public Law 96-367 to protect regions that were affected by the April 77 flood, to prevent such flooding as occurred in the April 77 flood. So what you see here is Congress authorizing and then later appropriating to the Corps of Engineers a program to mitigate future flooding events in this rural Appalachian region. The bottom left-hand corner, you see a map, and the importance of this is that these watersheds that flooded affected areas of southern West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, a portion of Tennessee, and then you can see also Buchanan and Dickenson counties in western part of the state of Virginia. So some important aspects of this project is that it's voluntary. So we have to have owners apply and accepted into this program and projects. We did a detailed project study and report, kind of a feasibility level back in 2002, 2003, and we found 730 eligible structures. So we entered into a project cooperation agreement with the county, and the cost share back in 2005, when we entered into this, was 95% federal and 5% non-federal. And as Ken pointed out, for the non-federal cost share, there are innovative ways to get credits for that, working kind. Primarily, we rely on LERDs, lands, easements, right-of-ways, relocations, and disposals, where they get credit for doing that towards their portion of the cost share. So an exciting time happened in late 2019 and early 2020. That's when the Disaster Relief Act of 2019 came into being, and this project received $235.6 million, and also authority for full federal funding to completion. So no longer did the county have to worry about their cost share. We were going to fund it to completion, we, the federal government. And you were probably wondering, well, what happened between the late 1980s when this was authorized and when we entered into a project cooperation agreement in 2005? Well, frankly, there was no funding associated with this project. Congress authorizes the Corps of Engineers to do work, but they also have to provide the appropriations, and there was not federal funds provided for this project. So it was exciting with the DRA 19 when we received all the funds. So immediately after we did that, we entered into a amended PCA, project cooperation agreement, with the county, and then we started implementing the project. So as I said, this was or is a voluntary program, and we've received numerous applications, and the application period is closed now, and we're processing and working through all the different parts of this project. If you can go to the next slide, Ken, I think you're controlling this. Yeah, so you can just see a snapshot of kind of where we're at. There's kind of three parts to this. There's flood-proofing structures, which is kind of raising in place, and we have to raise the structure above the April 77 flood elevation or the 100-year flood elevation, whichever is greater, and also all the utilities, accesses, and all that. And there's a photo here of one that was flood-proof, not in Buchanan County, but an adjacent county. Also, there's acquisitions and demolition of the structures. The photo that you see middle right is after we acquire a structure and the residents have moved and we've relocated them outside of the flood areas. Then we demolish the structure and we turn over the land with some restrictions to the county, and then finally, one of our big emphasis are public facilities such as schools, and this one has two, the Hurley High School and the Career and Technical Center, that we're working to relocate outside of the floodplain as well, in the area above the April 77 flood. So really, just one other thing, and to backtrack a little bit, when we received the authorization for this project, one of the first things we did is we looked to see if there were any way to perform our traditional structural fixes for flooding, such as putting dams in, levees, and that type of stuff. And really, that was eliminated pretty quickly through the study process as not really being feasible in these communities that are spread out and in rural Appalachian areas. So that's kind of a broad overview of the project, and you can see on the slides kind of where we're at, and we're working through in conjunction with the county. And so far so good. We're moving ahead with everything that we're planning to do at this point. So I'll close by just saying thanks again for the opportunity to discuss these projects. And if you have any questions, or we can direct you to other folks in the Corps of Engineers, our contact information is on this last slide. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Bob and Ken. Really appreciate the time. Again, a lot of really useful information here. I did notice we have one attendee with their hand up. So Jillian, maybe if you could unmute that person, see if there's a question.
Oh, it looks like it just went away. Oh, here we go. Albert, I'm allowing Albert to speak. It might have also just been by accident. Sometimes that happens, but
Sure. We'll give Albert a minute if he does have a question. If not, any other thoughts, comments, questions? A quiet group today. Okay, no worries. If folks think of questions, just you can hold them for the end. We can have a discussion. Before Carolyn's presentation, we do want to take a minute and acknowledge the city of Hampton has been awarded, received an award from APA. So I'm going to let Julie provide a little intro and some context to that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Julie Cobb, the Vice President of External Affairs for the Virginia chapter of the American Planning Association. Our next speaker is Carolyn Heaps-Picaro, the Resiliency Officer for the City of Hampton. The City of Hampton was awarded the Virginia chapter of APA's 2022 Resilient Virginia Community of the Year Award for its Resilient Hampton initiative. This award recognizes a community's effort and commitment to build resilience through responsible planning practice and innovation. Hampton has set an outstanding example for how to undertake resiliency planning. The Resilient Hampton initiative encapsulated several small plans and policies. Hampton has become the first city in Virginia to issue an environmental impact bond to supply capital for various projects related to resiliency. To date, the bond has secured $12 million in loan financing. Well, I guess that date is probably not correct, but I'm sure she'll correct me on that. The bond requires that the projects demonstrate that they have met their required outcomes, ensuring that the goals of the city and its stakeholders are met. This level of accountability and dedication is truly inspirational and a model of project delivery for all local governments. As the Resiliency Officer for Hampton, Carolyn has spearheaded efforts to find innovative funding options for increasing community resilience within the city. We congratulate Carolyn and the City of Hampton on winning the 2022 Resilient Virginia Community of the Year Award. And I would also like to make a quick plug for the 2023 APA Virginia Awards Program. The deadline for submitting award nominations has been extended to this Friday, March 3rd. So we encourage you all to submit your projects or anything that you believe is award worthy. Visit apavirginia.com for more details. And with that, I present to you Carolyn Heaps-Picara.
Thank you, Julie. Well, thank you so much for that overview. We were really honored to receive this award, and certainly I echo the suggestion that everybody submit an application for projects and planning efforts that you think are worthy. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, hopefully you can all see that okay. So I am going to be talking to you today and giving a little bit of an overview of some slides that I presented at the APA Virginia conference last summer in 2022 that gives an overview of Hampton's resiliency efforts as well as our environmental impact bond financing in particular. So as has been shared already, Hampton became the first Virginia municipality to use an EIB or environmental impact bond for our flood resiliency efforts back in 2020. This actually came after the city was selected by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to be one of their partners in working through this first issuance. And so we worked with CBF as well as Quantified Ventures and our engineering consultant team to develop and issue our EIB back in 2020. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Hampton, we are a waterfront community located at the mouth of the Chesapeake Bay and Hampton Roads. We're historic, founded in 1610, and have almost 138,000 residents in our diverse community. Importantly, as you can see on this slide, waterfront and waterways are a really integral piece of our community. Our vibrant coastal assets are really the backbone of Hampton. However, we also experience the challenges that come with being a coastal community and the multiple sources of flooding that we experience from stormwater, from tidal events, as well as the increasing challenges driven by sea level rise and the impacts of climate change. So this photo is from May of last year and shows some of that sunny day nuisance flooding that we experience. And then this map shows that about 30% of Hampton's land area is located within the special flood hazard area or the 1% annual flood risk based on our current understanding of current conditions. So the areas in the outlined red are repetitive loss clusters. So these are really the areas where we see repeated impacts, particularly after storm events like nor'easters and hurricanes. And of course, sea level rise is expected to really expand these areas in the coming decades. So understanding these challenges and the changing dynamics of coastal flooding, Hampton did commit to rethinking our approach back in 2015, 2016, and set out to establish a new city council strategic priority called Living with Water. And it's one of 7 of council's priorities that emphasizes our active waterways and waterfront, our cultural ties to the water, our natural ecosystems, as well as flood mitigation and climate change adaptation. So what we're doing here is recognizing and treating our water resources as the assets that they are at the same time as addressing the challenges of flooding. So since we established that strategic priority, the city has undertaken a variety of planning efforts, including the ones you see on the screen here. This central plan in the middle, our Living with Water Hampton plan, is our framework for Resilient Hampton and the initiative. It was pretty broad in scope and not prescriptive about individual projects, but it does set forward our values and our high-level goals for how we do this work. Then we also have a series, our first watershed level plan is shown on the left here, the New Market Creek Pilot Project Area Plan. And that more specifically identifies what we're doing at the watershed scale, so individual projects and programs. This slide shows the more than 20 projects that were identified in that New Market Creek Water Plan. And the 3 projects that are highlighted, the Big Bethel Blueway, North Armistead Avenue, and Lake Hampton, are the city's 3 pilot projects for resiliency that were selected to be pursued through the environmental impact bond. So our environmental impact bond was, as I mentioned, we committed to doing the EIB prior to doing the New Market Creek Water Plan. So as we were doing this planning process, We selected these projects in part because they were projects that we could establish really clear goals for how we were going to benefit the community. So as I mentioned, a key piece of this was working together with various partners, and on the screen here are some of those partners. So Quantified Ventures, that really served as our financial advisors, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, who served as our funder and our nonprofit partner, Moffitt and Nickel and Wagner and Ball, who were engineering and architecture consultants on the planning effort and the project development. And then of course, the city of Hampton, our stormwater engineers and planners. So what are environmental impact bonds? EIBs are a type of municipal bond label that signal to investors that the issuer has built in environmental, social, and corporate governance, transparency, and accountability into their bond structure. So that ESG, environmental, social, and corporate governance, is a framework for understanding what the non-financial returns are alongside financial returns of an investment. So this is thinking about people, planet, and profit, and not just profit. So really importantly, what differs from traditional bonds is that EIBs commit the issuer to do prediction, measurement, and disclosure along kind of the process of developing, seeking that funding, and then actually implementing the project. So again, the EIB works pretty similarly to other municipal bonds, with the exception of the 3 bullets on the last slide. And what differs along the way is the need to prepare technical documentation that quantifies the predicted project outcomes. And then secondly, to provide a framework for measuring and disclosing those outcomes along the way. And in terms of the benefits of an EIB, I'll organize this in 3 ways. Firstly, it really helps to support values and outcome-driven project management. So you're ensuring that your expected project outcomes are really well understood at the beginning when you're seeking that financing, and you have to describe what those benefits are going to be. So before, as well as during, when you're actually implementing, and ensuring that when you're doing the project designs, project implementation, construction, you're meeting those goals. And then after, when you do the final inspection of the project and ensuring that it was built as designed and getting the impacts you wanted to see. It also encourages adaptive management to meet project goals. So you're staying really focused on that outcome that you had envisioned in the start and not getting lost in other details or challenges along the way. And then it does require that collaboration that I mentioned between different key stakeholders in order to achieve mutual goals. Secondly, I think another benefit is that it can help to improve financial outcomes. So it may be possible to attract a more diverse pool of investors who are interested in this environmental social governance area if you go this route with an EIB. And if that's the case, if you're able to attract a more diverse pool, you might be able to get lower interest rates as a result. And then lastly, publicity and press for projects. Obviously, I'm here talking with you all today and have the opportunity to share about this. And we were honored with the APA award. So I think it offers a great opportunity for media coverage and sharing information about what your municipality is doing in a really positive way. So to get into the weeds a little bit on Hampton's EIB, we did seek $12 million in financing. Our bond closed on December 2020, excuse me. The use of those proceeds are going towards the 3 resiliency projects that I mentioned previously. I'll talk about those a little bit more in the slides to come. We are repaying our bond with stormwater fee revenues. And in order to do that, we did increase our stormwater fee by $1 in order to generate that revenue. And then the outcome metric that we are tracking and reporting on is our stormwater storage capacity added by those resiliency projects, so the volume of stormwater that we are now being able to store as a result. That measure was chosen because it was determined to be a good proxy for, obviously outcomes in reducing stormwater driven flooding. It's straightforward. I think people can really understand it and visualize it, especially if you take the time to make good graphics and use communication tools. And then lastly, it is already aligned with modeling that localities are already doing around stormwater. So something we were already going to be tracking through our modeling. Also worth mentioning is that the projects that we've talked about were also selected because of their social benefits. So ESG is environmental and social. So we looked at targeting these projects to majority minority communities who had historically less investment and support, and also higher levels of social vulnerability as it relates to health outcomes, income levels, and population age. So quickly, I'll talk about each of the projects in turn. So the first one, the Big Bethel Blueway project. This is a ditch retrofit project that will install 3 low dams over the body of an existing drainage channel to flow and store stormwater. So 2.7 million gallons of water storage is approximately the volume of 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools. And in addition to that stormwater storage, we are also installing a new biking and walking trail adjacent to the canal that will become a city-maintained linear park, as well as doing native plant installation. So this is what that existing ditch looks like. And this is what it'll look like once the project is completed. This is a rendering by our consultants. So you can see here the addition of that walking trail as well as the stormwater management features. The second 2 projects, North Armistead and Lake Hampton, kind of work together, so I'll speak about them together. This project will elevate North Armistead in an area that's currently prone to flooding as much as 5¼ feet. It will update our Lake Hampton, which is an existing lake, man-made lake that receives stormwater drainage from surrounding neighborhoods to increase the amount of water it can store. And it will upgrade and improve some of that water infrastructure that is connected into the lake. Again, in addition, it will expand public access to this already public area by constructing a new sidewalk as well as trails. And the stormwater storage is equivalent to approximately the volume of 9 Olympic-sized swimming pools. North Armistead Avenue currently floods an annual average of 92 hours a year. So we expect this project will basically eliminate that under current conditions and also help us prepare as tides continue to rise and we experience sea level rise. So this is what the current situation looks like at Lake Hampton and North Armistead. This is the lake, if you can see my hand here. And then this is North Armistead. So this whole section of Armistead will be raised. What currently happens is that tidal backflow combined with stormwater from the New Market Creek, which runs behind Lake Hampton and flows out this way towards the bay, currently it floods backward into the lake. And then that in combination with the runoff from the surrounding neighborhoods leads that lake to overflow into the street, which is quite low right in front of the lake in this area. So with the project, we will be constructing a berm around the back end of the lake, as well as installing green infrastructure and conducting that road raising to mitigate that tidal flooding, as I explained, stormwater and tidal compound flooding. So this is a different view, just a site plan rendered view of the project. You can see here that additional green infrastructure, as well as the extension of that, the trail network around the extent of the lake. So this is actually an existing trail that is here on site that we're expanding around. So it's a little bit more comprehensive and you can use it as a loop instead of just a linear trail. So this is what the lake currently looks like today. And this is what that's one section of trail will look like. We'll have kind of a section that comes out over the lake itself to give users an experience, kind of a boardwalk experience, as well as some of those additional native plant installation. So to summarize it all, this is how our bond proceeds, that $12 million is being allocated between the 3 projects. You can see at the bottom of the table the current status. Lake Hampton is a little bit out of date. We've actually selected a firm to do the construction and hope to get started on construction soon. And Big Bethel Blueway should be going out to bid very soon. So none of these projects are complete yet. We've just finished the designs. And in the case of North Armistead, are still working on the design process. I wanted to kind of wrap up by just sharing that none of these projects are being funded completely through the EIB. It is one piece of a larger funding puzzle that we've been piecing together to implement resiliency in Hampton. This is the case for many of our projects where we're not doing the complete funding of a project with one funding source, but using multiple. So in blue are the funding sources we're currently utilizing or planning to utilize for Lake Hampton and North Armistead in particular. And as you can see, there's a variety of funding sources used, including the Community Flood Preparedness Fund that was mentioned previously by Director Wells, as well as the EIB funding and other funding sources from local, state, and federal sources. Lastly, I wanted to end with how you can create an EIB if you're interested in the environmental impact bond and want to explore it for your community. I certainly do think it's something that it is accessible and something positive to explore if you're looking for loan financing. I would say a few tips, make sure to build this work into planning efforts. So we really did our EIB development alongside our new Market Creek water plan. So it was good to have identified from the start that it was something that was desirable to be able to identify those outcomes along the way. I would certainly consider that that communities consider working with external support to help you through this. So as I mentioned, we had the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and Quantified Ventures on board to support the city. And in a similar vein, definitely would recommend that you engage your financial leaders early and often throughout the process to make sure they're in the loop and aware and understand the opportunities and challenges related to the EIB. And then lastly, really suggest that communities use this as an opportunity to tell your story. So tell a compelling story about what your vision for resilience is and how the projects that you're seeking to fund fit in with that. It was something that the City of Hampton heard from our investors and consultants, that it was helpful to be building a story around this work and not just setting a number that we were going to achieve with the projects. So with that, I thank you all for your time and the opportunity to present. The contact information for our team is on the slides here. If you have any additional questions or want to talk about EIBs in more detail with our team, we'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
Ross, you're muted, I think.
Sorry about that. Thanks again, Carolyn. It's always great to hear about what the City of Hampton is doing. Y'all are always, really putting together some innovative work. So that APA award is well deserved. So we don't have any chat questions in the chat box yet, but I feel like we could open it up. If there's anything for the whole panel.
I have a quick question for Carolyn, if that's okay. Congratulations on your award, first of all. What do you think gave the city the political will and the political courage to jump out and try an environmental impact bond? Was it the comfort of having other revenue streams, Community Flood Preparedness Fund, or the ability to use a stormwater revenue and get fee revenue from that? What do you think was what convinced them? Or was it increasing flooding in the community and the citizens needing an answer?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer this to the best of my ability, having not actually been here when the bond was issued. But I think it really was this overarching vision that had been built and this commitment to do something through the Resilient Hampton program. So through your question, you asked, was it the challenge of flooding? And I certainly think that was a piece of it, that the city had really recognized that one, we needed to do something, and then two, I think it was the fact that we had these partners that were really keen on helping the city achieve the EIB. So, without Chesapeake Bay Foundation and Quantified Ventures, I'm not sure how much the city would have pursued this particular funding stream on its own. So again, that gets back to my recommendation. I think it is useful to bring in outside partners, particularly because, first of all, EIBs are still a fairly new, fairly innovative funding source, but also they're something that, municipal governments have typically not pursued in the past. So having that support definitely made sure that it made it from idea through fruition. But I think the political will and the commitment to resiliency that was set out through the Dutch dialogues and the Living with Water strategic priority really set us on that path to do it, to commit to doing it.
And we do have a question that came in from the chat box. For the EIB, how do the interest rates for this initiative compare to the existing traditional bond structures, such as a general obligation bond or a revenue bond against the SWU revenue?
So when the city of Hampton went out for the EIB, my understanding is that we did get a better interest rate than we would traditionally get through, our traditional municipal bond finances. I don't think it was significantly better, and I apologize, I don't have the exact numbers on the top of my head, but I can certainly share those afterwards. But I think the advantage is in our current climate where maybe interest rates are going up and it's even more difficult to get a good rate, it might be even more attractive now. It's a good question about other bond sources like, the Virginia, the loan fund that's being set up by the state, for example, it might be somewhat comparable to those as well. So again, I think it's one potential funding stream that you can pursue if you're looking for loan financing. It's certainly not the only one, and certainly not the only one that Hampton is using. So I think there's pros and cons to going after it. The media coverage, the accountability, and the disclosing your outcomes are all benefits of using this particular funding source that you may or may not get with other sources of revenue that you're pursuing. And yeah, I hope that answers the question. Sorry, I don't have exact numbers.
No, I think that's great. It's perfect. Any other questions? While folks are still thinking about questions, as this kind of ties into our focus area today on funding, I do just want to mention that Wetlands Watch has been working with the Virginia Outdoors Foundation to put together what we're calling the Coastal Resilience and Trees Fund. It's a much smaller grant program. I think we have something like $180,000 in funding available. But basically, we're looking for opportunities to expand tree canopy in the coastal zone, activities that increase resilience to flooding, sea level rise, extreme weather events. But the goal is to really use this for projects that may not be eligible for other funding or to use as gap funding. So I'm just going to drop a link into the chat. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me or someone else on the Wetlands Watch team. That grant opportunity ends on April 4th of this year. So hope folks will consider it. It's the inaugural year, so we're hoping to get a good response. Any other?
I actually have a question for Bob and Ken, if I can ask it. You mentioned during your presentation about the Corps' relocation assistance. I'm curious if you could just explain a little bit more what that looks like for non-structural projects, and then what role the county plays in that process of relocating when you're going through an acquisition demolition project.
It's probably a better one for Bob to answer than for me to answer. So I kick that over to him, assuming he's still on here.
I am, yeah. For relocations, there's a public law, and I can't remember the actual public law that authorizes the Corps through our real estate office to provide relocations, and it's handled out of our real estate office through our realty specialists, and they have the knowledge and the specifics about that. I would probably screw it up if I tried to provide any information on that, but I can certainly ask them to provide that if you want to send a note to us, and we can provide information for your specific question.
Sure, that sounds good. Thank you.
Great. Well, we're getting close to our time here. Just any other final comments, thoughts? I do want to thank again all of the participants, Ken, Bob, Matt, Carolyn. Really appreciate you taking the time today. For all the folks, if there's anyone else on the call who's participated in the past, one of the last 7 sessions, and really the strength of these webinars is based on the speakers we bring in. So you all have made this a very, very useful resource for us, and really appreciate it. Really appreciate APA VA and also the Virginia Environmental Endowment we had some early conversations with Joe Marine at VE and kind of led to this series. So thanks to VE as well. And, also obviously to Elizabeth at VCPC for pulling all this together. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Ross. It's been great. Appreciate everyone coming. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers, to Berkeley Group for sponsoring, and a huge thank you again to Ross and Elizabeth for putting this series together. All the follow-up information will be coming your way shortly, so keep an eye out on your inboxes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.